Hi everybody. Welcome to our webinar today titled Negotiation and Influence. It's all about increasing your impact. Today with Lloyd Mander, Patrick Roitier, and Fiona McKenzie. My name is Sean McDonald and I shall be your moderator in the background for the next 45 odd minutes. Firstly, though, thank you so much for attending today. We always appreciate the effort you make to be here for our live webinar events. During the session, if you have any questions, please try and use the Q&A button on your toolbar. It just enables us to keep a track of things as we're going through the webinar, and we hope you can ask as many questions as you would like. And finally, if you stay through till the end, which of course we hope you will do, and as is now very customary for our webinars, we have a special treat for you. By answering a really short 1-minute survey at the end of the webinar, you'll go in the draw to win one of our beautiful gift hampers worth over $400. Now, for those not too familiar with BoardPro, we are a board software provider, sometimes called a board portal, and we serve just over 35,000 users around the globe, across about 34 different countries these days. And we enable organizations to prepare for and run their board meetings more efficiently and effectively with less time and deliver more impact and value for the organization. And as much as we are a board software provider, part of our wider mission here at BoardPro is to make the fundamentals of governance free and easy to implement for all organizations, but especially those organizations with resource constraints. And one of the many ways we do this is by providing access, free access that is, to hundreds of business templates, governance templates, guides, and resources, which you will find, funnily enough, in the resources section of our website. And these webinars that we host every week on Thursdays are a great way of accessing key governance knowledge without necessarily the time commitment and costs associated with in-person events. So for the next 40 odd minutes, just relax, sit back and listen and add to the discussion by asking as many questions as you would like. A full recording of the webinar along with the slide deck and other resources will be sent to you 24 hours after the session today. So let me start by having our team introduce themselves, and I'm going to start today with you, Fiona.
Thank you, Sean, and hello, everybody. My name is Fiona McKenzie. I'm dialing in from Sydney, Australia, from the Gadigal lands of the Eora people, which is close into the CBD of Sydney. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm a negotiation and conflict specialist. I've got a background in management consulting, but I've spent the last decade helping leaders and teams use conflict and negotiation skills to drive alignment. I believe that everything in life is better when you face the tough stuff. And I know that it's normal and natural to avoid conflict, but when we face it, that's when we make progress. And to face it, you need negotiation skills. That's how it all ties together. So that's what I've been devoting myself to for the past decade, demystifying negotiation and teaching people how to embrace healthy conflict. And I do that in a few different ways. I speak at conferences, I run training programs with government, industry, and university. I coach leaders and I help boards and leadership teams reach collaborative agreements. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks, Fiona. Patrick, over to you.
Patrick Roitier, Professor of Practice International Negotiation, also the principal of Pro Consulting International, a 35 international career on 5 continents in various sectors. And of that 35 years, the last 20 years, say 50% of the time, heavily involved in teaching a number of business management schools around the world. That's typically MBA, executive MBA, and then the assorted public education courses. Basically, what's described as a pracademic, that's a combination of an academic and a practitioner, which has inspired our tagline, "We teach what we do and do what we teach." So with the limited time, we've highlighted a number of things that we hope will be of interest to you, challenge your mindset as well around negotiation and influencing.
Thanks, Patrick. And finally, Lloyd.
Kia ora koutou, welcome everyone. I'm Lloyd Mander. I'm the founder and principal consultant for DOT Scorecard. That's Diversity of Thought Scorecard. We run evaluations for boards and senior teams so they can understand their potential for diverse thinking and their decision-making culture. With the aim of improving their performance when it comes to decision making, especially the more complex decisions. I'm particularly interested in this topic as diversity of thought can play an important role when it comes to influence and negotiation. And in fact, Patrick and I have been running a study for the last 4 years. And it's alongside that study that got me quite interested and excited to share Patrick's work with you today. So it's fantastic to have Fiona and myself to join in a conversation with Patrick. As Sean's encouraged, please do post questions as we go along. We'll try and address them as we go through. Now, we're going to be tackling a few topics today. We're not really going to be tackling the tactics of negotiation, and I'm sure you've encountered some of those, but we're talking about some other matters today. So first of all, what kind of negotiator are you? So this is really around facing up to your true strengths and weaknesses. We're going to look at behavioral and reception psychology. So this is understanding how you come across to others. Advanced preparation, how thorough preparation can support performance in so many different ways, whether it's value creation, better risk mitigation, and supporting your confidence when you're entering into a negotiation situation. Better negotiation proposals, so going beyond stating what you want and basic assumptions to addressing how you will be successful and what will happen even if you miss the mark. Protecting personal and organizational credibility. So if you perform poorly under pressure, it's not going to do you or your organization any favors next time, if there's a next time. And throughout today's session, all the things we're going to cover are going to put you in a better position to avoid unnecessary conflict and manage that conflict better if and when it does indeed arise. So you've joined this webinar on negotiation influencing, so I can make the assumption that you are interested in the topic. But why is it relevant? Why does it matter? Well, here's a sort of a long but still not complete list of potential situations where negotiation influence and skills may be relevant to board members and other senior leaders. But the goal, I guess, of today's session is to try and sort of broaden your thinking even further around the applicability of some of the skills and things that we're going to talk about today. This list includes things that board members can do individually to enhance their influence. Are also going to look a little bit at the board's role in sort of role modeling good practices for management teams and for others in their organization so they can perform better in negotiation, and also boards improving their oversight of management teams when they're undergoing negotiation. I'm now going to hand over to Patrick to get us underway and lead us through some of the key concepts and approaches that you'll be able to put into practice straight away.
Thank you, Lloyd. When we started on our master for the art and science of influencing and negotiation, very quickly we ended up with that dichotomy between, on the one hand, the wider framework mindset, and then obviously at some point we need to look at skill sets and how that translate between the two. But I would argue that a lot of skills actually wouldn't make sense unless they're driven by that mindset. So a number of things that I hope to challenge you with today are very much sitting as on that mindset and how that translates into that skill sets as well. One of the core aspects that we typically start a program with is, if we were to really want to improve our performance as a professional, as a senior manager, as a negotiator influencing, one would typically start as on, well, what sort of negotiator are you? And then, of course, typically people would answer with their self-image, which is great. And if you're a bit more critical, you may even want to do typically an American style of test, which then would give you a certain profile. And then I would challenge anybody in a program saying, what's fundamentally missing here? Well, the answer, of course, is how you're perceived in the audience by the people on the other side. And just when you think, oh, well, typically that's going to be very similar, you couldn't be more wrong. to the point that actually very often, if you were to watch your own video, you hear yourself, your team, yourself arguing, counter-arguing. That's often where the shock happens. But so that self-awareness is so important. It's also very universal. You wouldn't play tennis, you wouldn't play golf, you wouldn't be in rugby if you would not, after the match, whether you're a winner or not, look at the video. And of course, nowadays you get so much data, so much analysis, all to further improve. That's not so much what we do in management, so to speak. So in that influencing negotiation training, basically taking people to the next level, part of it is working around that self-awareness. What sort of negotiator are we? And just when you think, well, I would be this type of, that would be my label, I'm still going to have to disagree with you. That's what comes out of typically North American management style, where we like labels, right? And you're this and I am that, etc. I'm going to challenge you right away, and I don't think you're going to disagree with me. If you're only one type of negotiator, you're a poor one. You're typically several types of negotiators. And my proof of the pudding is just look at yourself as a parent and a parent negotiator. There's going to be moments you're going to be very much like this, and possibly with another child an hour later, very much different one. That's not going to be one style of and systematically perceiving one. So if I were to help people as on becoming more expert negotiators, the first step were to be working around that self-awareness, getting over the nerves of watching, hearing yourself. It's never pleasant for no one, but you learn so terribly much. And over a number of days, typically our programs are 3-4 days. So you would do every day another negotiate, and watching yourself grow, evolve. That's out of that self-awareness, watching yourself and getting peer review feedback. You then systematically work to increase a number of things. So that's certainly an important aspect. And it matches that second aspect as on, I would challenge audiences as on what's the difference between somebody with a lot of experience versus somebody who's expert. Because of time, I'm going to go fast. The answer is, if you were to seek systematically analysis after every seance of negotiation, that were to be the expert. That's what the best pianist does in Australia. That's what a top golfer does, etc. Regardless, however good or not good you are, you systematically seek to evaluate in order to further improve. That's your individual culture, individual professional culture. I would hope you would inspire that towards organizational culture on the board and even out of the board towards the management team, setting that as a new standard. So if we were to look as on growing further around that expert negotiator, those were certainly to be my two main themes at this point. Fiona?
Thanks, Patrick. Yes, when I run negotiation training, far and away, the thing that people learn most from is actually the assessments, that they're videoed. We look back at them. I give them written and verbal feedback, and people that go through that process a few times radically improve. And I think, we talk about what type of negotiator are you. We all have reflex styles, but those reflex styles are quite different given the context, and really good negotiators can adapt their style. So Patrick mentioned at home, you might be quite an accommodating negotiator at home, but at work you're very competitive. And there's all different styles that we use. And Patrick's already talked about the wanting to label people, and I think sometimes the labels are helpful, but I like to quote George Box, who was a British statistician, who said all models are wrong, some are helpful. Sometimes having a label helps you recognize where your deficiencies are. So it's not just looking at your strengths, looking at your deficiencies. But look, I totally concur. If you want to get better at negotiation, you actually need to do that practice where you're looking back at how you're performing, and you need to grow your self-awareness so that you know that you're using the right style for the context.
It's actually a real challenge, I think, for us, for those like myself, who perhaps don't enjoy watching videos of myself. But yeah, if I want to get better, I have to really commit to that sort of process. And we actually got an early question there from Paul. Thank you, Paul. Just around how does negotiation fit with curiosity and being open to being wrong? Well, I suspect our coming slides might address that really well, actually.
Yeah. Allow me to pause that question for now, Paul, and
Yeah.
promise to come back to it in just a moment. Yeah. Okay, shall we move on to the
Yeah.
reception psychology side of it? So basically, that's another main anchor that's relatively rare. Reception psychology is originally out of Germany, 60s, and as the name kind of suggests, it's very much looking as on diffusing attention from ourselves, intention, etc., towards reception, the other side. And that's very much that mindset aspect. Less me and more attention towards the other side, which then comes through in a number of aspects. And you can imagine in negotiation, influencing how that's just crucial. This or that argument, how is that going to sound? How will that look from the other side? And so naturally and technically speaking, you were to look as on, I want to see your arguments. We're all good at that, right? And then I want to see the counter arguments. Well, I don't know. That's for them. Well, if you do your homework professionally, you would have anticipated, and a real professional has no problem coming up with 70, 80% of the counter arguments, right? So, however, if you were to come up with this, I could imagine that your position were to be, and that's not necessarily where we were coming from. And you could even build in those counter arguments in your speech, in your pitch, right? Which, by the way, for an audience is really interesting because just what it is you were thinking, that's what you were saying on the other side. You do that once, you do that twice, you do that thrice. Hallelujah. Is there anything that you haven't thought of that would be on my mind? That's powerful. It's also building credibility. Oh my God, you've done your homework here, right? Rather than, this is what I want. That's your daughter who's 16, right? I want a slab of chocolate. And then, you can bicker a bit around it, do some rugby around it, not on a professional negotiation table. So that fundamental non-stop audience perception is just the core out of it. You're not going to disagree with me that following media today, it's so often missing, right? People just put on the table, that's what I want, that's what I think, and it basically stops there, realizing that even this or that agenda were to be completely unacceptable from the other side. Just half an hour homework, a bit of history would show you right away. So just putting your position that has no viability basically is not going to be helping much. Between brackets, I go as far as saying to people, before you send an important email, have it proofread. Before you do a social media post, have it proofread. Because it's been brewing in your mind, me. And it all makes sense for me. However, it could be that this or that would trigger a different reaction, different interpretation. Of course, that you could easily anticipate, easily correct, and send out a better message just from that fundamental understanding of, and rather than being just me and my thinking, bringing in that third party critical sense, so to speak. Part of that same thinking has to do as well. If you're into that reception psychology, you were to understand more easily, if I were to do this or that, well, it's then going to automatically being perceived on the other side, they could do this or that as well. That's what's called precedent setting. If you think you should be able to get away with doing this, well, then the other party can do that as well. In no time, you will have created principle of reciprocity, well, if it is fine for you, if you now set the standards to be like that, well, then the other party has the right, not necessarily the need, the right to basically do the same. Very often people wouldn't see that far because they just think me and I could do and my immediate plan, not seeing how it will impact the other side from that. Out of that reception, one of the things that's as well relatively new, so to speak, as in the last 10, 15 years, is that recognition that as managers, we are not those rational machines that was considered 15, 20 years ago. In management schools, I wasn't necessarily popular many years ago, bringing in that aspect of emotionality in management. You know, we are managers and we have our theories and plenty of books on management styles. And the emotional side of it wasn't very welcome, so to speak, as a discussion point. A lot of work in neuroscience has actually revealed what was started by DiMaggio many years ago. And we now know very well, as reflected in many of publications around the different brains. Long story very short, we have brain number 3 and 4, of which only the last one, brain number 4, is the cognitive brain. And before, not after, not on the side, before is the limbic brain. That's just the name it's being used to refer to. What is the immediate implication once you understand how important in your own functioning, but also other people functioning, that emotionality, that limbic brain is? Once you realize that, recognize it, potentially where needed, you can then interact. And my description were to be, do what it is you can do for the limbic brain not to run away with the cognitive brain. That never happens to you, of course not. And we always are 100%, right? And so if I had time, you know, there's only 1,500 examples as on where even absolutely bright top people and even a number of people today, you know, indeed have that limbic brain running away with them and not even getting to that control from the cognitive brain. Fiona?
Thanks, Patrick. I've got a couple of things to say about everything you've just said there. Firstly, the power of reciprocity is a really important concept in negotiation. I think about it, you've talked about it in terms of precedent setting. If you do that, I can do that. I would put a positive spin on reciprocity as well. Hopefully, if you've done all of your planning before the negotiation, you've actually worked out what your concessions are, how much they matter to you, what concessions the other party might give to you, what they matter to you and to them. And it's possible with the power of reciprocity to offer something that doesn't matter to you, so in the hope that they feel obliged to return favour with something that might matter to you. There's some really interesting studies on reciprocity by Robert Cialdini. He talks about what tips you get with how many mints the waiter puts out, things like that. We don't have time to go further into that, but if you're interested, look that up. That's interesting. The other thing that I wanted to comment on is just about the limbic brain and prefrontal cortex. So we make all of our executive decisions in the prefrontal cortex. But when your emotions, the limbic system, that's where that detects threats and can override the prefrontal cortex. And good negotiators know how to manage that, and even better negotiators know how to identify some sort of amygdala hijack where the limbic system's getting out of control in the other party and use some steps to calm them down. So as Patrick said, it's really interesting research, the role on negotiation. And in my work, I teach state, as in your self state, as much as I teach content and process and tactics in negotiation. So yeah, have a look at those things.
I'm just going to take away from this, I guess, that sense that, yeah, just keeping the emotional side of things in mind. And we've been talking a lot here about preparation, and we're going to continue to talk about preparation, but actually not making sure you're creating space to get yourself in the right frame of mind before you proceed. Just before we tackle the business uncertainty simulator, I've got a question from Peggy. Just back to those negotiation styles. Are some negotiation styles those characterized by Thomas Kilmann, uh, Thomas Kilmann conflict styles, so competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, accommodating? Are they anything to do with negotiation styles?
That's indeed very much the type of labels that one uses. I would argue very often it's a combination thereof.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, an important aspect there is as well, we won't have time to go there, but the cultural intelligence is such an important factor there. So how those things differ, a lot of that material is based from, say, a Northern Hemisphere, if not Western Caucasian model. Actually, in a lot of cases, I'm thinking of Southeast Asia and the likes of, but even Latin America, Africa, those things right away take a different take to it, to what we assume to be the case in our part of the world.
Okay. Sorry.
Sorry, Lloyd. I would just add on the Thomas Kilmann model. I find it, as I said, George Box, all models are wrong, some are helpful. It's not a judgmental quadrant. You see a lot of 2x2 matrices, and the bottom left is all wrong, and the bottom top right is all right, and whatever. That's not the case with this. There are actually times when compete, avoid, accommodate are just as appropriate as compromise and collaborate. And that's something that I work through with my clients as well.
Yeah.
While I've got you there, Fiona, what about Laura's asked a question around the impact of gender on negotiation, Fiona. What will your comments be on that?
Yeah, I have said to Sean, we could spend a lot of time on this in previous sessions. Things have really changed. There were some really interesting books written about 20 years ago, Why Women Don't Ask, by Linda Lashiva, something like that, and another one, I don't remember, it's on my bookshelf. And they were looking at MBA students, and the males would ask and the women don't ask. The research today is showing that women do ask, but there are still structural systems that mean they don't always get the same offers as men do. I do have a course that I teach, Women in Negotiation, and we look at the history and how it's evolved and some tools around that. I think it's not an equal playing field yet. In my lifetime, it's improved, and I really hope that it's continuing to move. I think a lot of the research also says today that LGBTIQ plus people also have the same sort of backlash that women can face, but it has improved, would be my opinion on that.
Okay. Now, Patrick, we're tantalizing people with this business uncertainty simulator. Tell us more.
Right. So this is one of the relatively new, recent, but quite popular concepts we developed, not uninspired by the fact that we worked for 8 years in international airlines. The fact that actually we look at leadership management as on what it is that you should be able to do and the likes of basically the challenge coming out of a business uncertainty simulator has got to do about the fact that in plain vanilla English, as a pilot, the fact that you can fly the plane under standard circumstances is a standard, right? Does not make you a good pilot. The good pilot, and by association, the better manager, the better leader, because of course this is as much valid for public sector as it is for industry, commercial environments. The better leader, manager, negotiator is the one who's actually comfortable, ready, and comfortable is such an important thing for what is it that you do when there's one engine out. Actually, on a two-plane aircraft, our usual Airbuses and the likes of, two engines out. You're still in control, you're calm, you have a good idea what to do. Airport closed, maybe because of drones, very much an issue in Europe for the moment. Fog in Christchurch, you name it. Violence in the cabin, you working with the crew, what is it that you do? Passenger deceased, I remember a couple of years in my experience. Those are the things that you are prepared for. Right? And that's what makes a difference between just a pilot and a really good pilot. You are prepared and you got to see that as your mission. as on less drama queen and more the calm, true leader that when things are very different than originally intended, well, that's where you're there for. If everything goes according to plan, my assistant could do it, right? We have you at your pay level for those circumstances that are challenging, right? And so when we're talking about tariffs and all those drama queens coming out of the corner, well, actually, there's nothing, historically speaking, nothing very new. It's just one of those circumstances. You have the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal closed. For the moment, we're looking as on the channel between UK and Europe being firmly jeopardized. If those things don't work out, in my humble perception, and working a lot with commerce, supply chain partners and the likes of, you see quickly the difference between the one who are ready to, yeah, okay, that's not very much intended. So we're going to do just like a good pilot would do in a cockpit. So our mindset, and whether you're national government, regional government, small startup, you're a large international business, it doesn't change. Your mindset ought to be, this is standard. To be honest, that's what my PA could do. Your calling is actually, and your preparation is, what is if you do when a number of critical arguments turn out to be very different? That's the mindset. And so I would, working with say, large city councils or regional governments and the likes of, that's where it becomes very quiet. Because, say, for flooding and that sort of thing, we have our plan, but it goes much further. I remember last in health, the challenge has seen the overspending in health. Okay, what is that we're going to do? How can we deliver the same, if not better, in health with 25% less of a budget? If you're now going home, then you're not the leader that we need, right? So you're looking as on how can we manage calm, quietly, analytical, in control when those anomalies actually happen. Fiona?
Thanks, Patrick. My brother actually is recently retired, but he was a military fighter pilot and then flew commercially. And they definitely, as Patrick said, they don't practice for the standard landing. They practice for the bird strike and everything going wrong. And as negotiators, that's what we want to be doing. I work with clients who call it red teaming. It's like pressure testing. And we drill and we drill and we drill, and you drill until you can deal with every scenario. You drill until you get it right, and then you drill until you can't get it wrong. And I quite like in training to run like a speed dating. And so, you line everyone up and one chair moves along. And, if one party's making threats, practice how you counter that. If they're pressuring you into a concession, you practice how you counter that. If they're using data that's false, etc., making 11th hour demands. So practice doesn't make perfect, but practice makes better. And it's really important. And again, that's about the prep. You want a red team, pressure test, try everything, drill everything. And even if 1% of the scenarios that you've practiced happen in the negotiation, you're ready for them. And it makes the world of difference to your success.
Let's hear more about preparation, Patrick.
Pardon?
Let's hear more about preparation.
Yeah. One of the other cornerstones has been about the advanced preparation, and not just as a mindset. Does that mean that we just double the time and we're still casually sitting around the table with our laptops open and that sort of thing, which invariably makes me kind of nervous. When we're talking about much more advanced preparation, maybe a comment to start off is it's something, as you would expect, that's again culturally very sensitive. As on from working in New Zealand, we don't tend to prepare so much. We think it's very cool to go somewhere and then just wing it. And I admit there is some coolness to it, but it just scares my Europeans, my Singaporeans and the likes of, who really enjoyed, not just do it, enjoy the analysis, the breakdown tree, the decision trees, etc. So the need of advanced preparation is to a large extent a cultural thing, but that doesn't matter much. If it's not much our culture, just means we need to do some extra there. What does that mean in reality? To start off, most preparation to a negotiation, they would have a scenario. Well, I think at a certain level, one scenario is not good enough. One would like to see multiple scenarios, an A, a B, a C, so that if one scenario, even if it looked like this was going to be the topic of the negotiation, well, what happens if that's taken off the table? All of a sudden, they change the scenario, there comes out a new aspect, etc. Oh, well, we're not prepared of that. We may as well go home. Don't think so. Too expensive, both, of course, in just man hours, but also in credibility and the likes of. It's also not very creative. Looking as on multiple scenarios were to be actually quintessential, and also shows the depth and dynamics, enthusiasm of that preparation team to the negotiation. Other than that, while often preparation is about this is what we want to do, this is how we will argue that this is what it is that we want to do, and then we'll see what they come back with. Again, fine, but not impressive. Impressive were to be having spent as much time on the other side as on you do it yourself. You would do what's called, technically, doesn't matter much, a SWOT. Well, you would do a double SWOT. You would spend as much time on the analysis of the other side, much more difficult because obviously you know much more about your side, less about the other side. And based on that double SWOT, you then look as on this is where they probably would be coming from, their precedents that they didn't want this, didn't find that acceptable, so we would argue that, etc., etc. So that actually not only you have prepared for your position, it turns out actually part of your position has very much of that other position baked in the sense of taking considerations of. Now, another important thing, and of course that's sitting with that line of reception psychology, we tend to communicate well, right? This is what I want. Well, that's again what my 16-year-old would do, right? At our level, the focus were to be, and that's that combining of reception psychology with everything we said so far, you want to create buy-in, commitment. If there were to be no buy-in, whatever that it is you want, even, and that's an important nuance, even if you were to get a yes to it, but no buy-in, right? That American getting to a yes. Well, it's not because you get a yes that you've done a good job. Without that buy-in, there's very important value that you're missing. Like what? Well, if you were to get really buy-in from the other side, you would get flexibility from their side beyond the KPIs, right? You would get preference status, right? Versus we're going to do what we have agreed, etc. Well, actually, if one comes into a variance, into maybe a bit of a crisis, that preference status is gold value. Last but not least, out of that better relation, that alliance nature almost, you get that know-how of the other side, willing to contribute to the value of, rather than just these are the KPIs, we can do that, signing off, and there you go. And you would have thought, you, Mr. Ego, you've done a fantastic job. While actually you would not have the buy-in, you would not even have checked whether there's true commitment, buy-in to what it is that you've negotiated. Not the end of the world, but clearly a difference between a not so good negotiator versus a good negotiator. And last but not least, that's of course taking on board all of those cognitive aspects, sitting under that cognitive empathy banner, but at the same time, as we discussed earlier, all those affective aspects, emotional aspects, sitting under the affective empathy as well, all part of that preparation. Fiona?
Thanks, Patrick. I think the more prep that you do, the better. When I teach negotiation, we spend more time on the prep than what you might be doing during the negotiation and the live tactics. My list of what you want to do as an absolute minimum, I think about what they want and what you want, why you want it, why they might want it, what are the objective standards, how are we going to judge the position, what makes it legitimate. A really important one is common ground. I think sometimes we forget that. But if you can identify any aligned positions and interests, that can really turn a negotiation because suddenly you're working collaboratively to solve something. Think about the alternatives, your plan B. Negotiators call that a BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. That's your single source of power, absolute power. If you can walk away, that allows you to negotiate to get what you want. Key messages, leading questions, plan all that stuff, think about the logistics, and then all that scenario prep that we talked about. If that happens, what will you do? What is the worst thing that they can say is a really good question to think about in your preparation, especially if you're expecting some conflict there. And so it's not just about preparing the content. It's also about preparing your state, as we talked about. How will I be emotionally ready to stay rational in the situation? Thanks.
Maybe continuing on.
Yeah, I think so. Move on to proposals. Yeah. So what sort of tangible resources and outputs might we expect?
Because one could get diffused in those different aspects. At the end of the day, I would expect from my preparation teams minimal preparation outcomes. To do something that looks like stakeholder mapping. What are actually all the parties? More common in public sector than it is in business, but basically the core question were to be challenge oneself. What other parties could there be, would there be, that we would have overlooked and that could potentially boomerang back into the issue? We just discussed that double SWOT. PESTEL as on all of those international consideration today, that's data security, cyber security, footprint, environment, all of social responsibility, all of those aspects, supply chain. An important aspect in there is the maximum scenario. Maximum scenario is to counter the more of the same. This is typically what we do. And then they do this, and then we do that. And in the past, roughly, okay, so we're happy. Not sure. Actually, I think I'm overpaying you because I want from my people at that level at least a consideration creatively deeper. Is there something else of value that we could create? And so typically larger organizations, large businesses really want to see that value creation as being part of the negotiation rather than the typical one. What is it that we could, out of the opportunity, costly opportunity, what could else we could create? But now Fiona just explained a very important, powerful, the taboo, what is it that's off the table, argument, counter arguments. We discussed the concession strategy, what's your plan? You're not going to improvise the concessions you're going to make. And I'm going to link that up to another aspect. All of this basically has to be cleared with +1, +2, potentially all the way up to the board. So that potentially you're not out there. And I'm thinking of negotiations that could last 6 months, so to speak, where you could end up with an orphan team while things have changed. So fundamentally, and so in our negotiation training, I typically will be the CEO or the board member, and they will come back to me and report as on the preparation and seek my approval, which, depending on the circumstance, would work or not.
Okay, just thank you. We're at time almost there. So this last one there was just around making sure there's a tangible output resource there that you're actually holding yourself accountable. So you're saying what's going to happen if things don't work out to plan and how that's going to be monitored and measured over time. So some of my takeaways today have been very much around this idea of investing in that preparation. I think you both covered that really, really well. That iceberg, I think, image was a really good one there. You've got to really test your thinking. You have to see it from the other side. You have to account for different scenarios, not just your favored scenario. And that earlier question around curiosity, you really do have to be curious. And it might be that sort of joint problem solving that Fiona, that you touched on there before, and to finish that, leading into accountability. So looking at what's going to happen next beyond that negotiation. It's definitely been a good learning experience for me. Thank you both.
Thank
Thank you for the
you.
opportunity.
Stay curious, ask questions.
Well said. So please feel free to connect with our great presenters today on LinkedIn, everybody. I'm sure they'll look forward to your connection. If you'd like to be put in touch with any of our panelists today, please indicate your interest on the survey at the end of the webinar as you exit. We have some fantastic webinars coming up over the next week or two. I'd also like to draw your attention to a webinar we have on the 29th of January, which is about how to become a great board chair with Giselle McLaughlin. I'd highly recommend that webinar to you. It's a free webinar, of course. So keep an eye out for that one on our website. So you'll receive an email from me, it'll be tomorrow now, which will include a video of today's webinar along with the presentation slides and the transcript. So just as you leave the webinar, don't forget to complete our really short 1-minute survey to go in the draw for our hamper. I'll announce the winner for that tomorrow as well. So thank you again for attending, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the session with Fiona, Patrick, and Lloyd. I know I did. Look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, everybody. Have a great day.